somewhat depending upon the volume that we're talking about. So once we see what this looks like with all the attachments, we'll have a better idea how long that process will take. But 30 to 60 days is normal.
Okay, we're going to move into the comments from the public portion of today's meeting. But before I open the floor to any comments from the public, I would like to clarify that the NRC does not believe that there is an imminent safety threat with the canisters that are currently loaded with the standoff pins. Additional review of these canisters may be warranted based on the outcome of NRC's review of these apparent violations and the information that we receive. Fran?
Yes, sir. I understand we're ready for Q&A from the public.
We are.
If you'd like to ask a question over the telephone, please press *1. Unmute your phone and record your name clearly, please, when prompted. Your name is needed to introduce your question. If you decide to withdraw that request, press *2. But again, to ask a question, please press then 1 and record your name. One moment, please, for our first question. Our first request is from Nina Vadiar. Ma'am, your line is open now.
Thank you. According to the NRC's own executive summary, Holtec is in violation of their NRC license requirements. Therefore, the 4 berry cans at San Onofre create, quote-unquote, a possibility of a malfunction of a different result than any previously evaluated in the final safety analysis report, FSAR, unquote. At San Onofre, this equates to 3 possible malfunction results. A, broken shims. B, broken shims that impede fuel assembly cooling. C, overheated fuel assemblies resulting in a radioactive release. Since this defective system is in violation of 10 CFR 7248, will NRC consider taking decisive corrective action to require Holtec to retrieve and inspect those cans with defective shims at Vermont Yankee and also San Onofre? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mike Layton. Thank you for the question and the comments. The purpose of this panel, the pre-decision enforcement panel, and the following decisions that will happen based on what we determined from the evaluation of the information that we get from Holtec, is designed to provide the significance of the safety issues and also whether there are any follow-up actions that need to be taken. The items that you identified in your comment and questions are ones that we are very interested in evaluating as part of our enforcement process that we're currently in. So I would offer that the outcomes of our deliberation and our enforcement decision will be made public, and if you have any further comments after we finish our enforcement process, to please let us know and bring them forward. We had a question in the room.
Thank you. My name is Paul Gunter, and I'm with Beyond Nuclear. We're a public interest group in Tacoma Park, Maryland. So the question I have for NRC has to do with your deliberative process for escalated enforcement action and how the agency is factoring any previous or subsequent violations by Holtec. And in specific, I'm referencing EA 18155, which has to do with songs cast downloading, and the fact that there were 3 level 4 violations involving frequent cask loading incidents, and failure to identify adverse conditions, failure to adequate program training, failure for proficiency in training, and failures for certification of individuals involved in the cask downloading operations. It also involved failure to provide adequate procedures for dry cask downloading operations, and in fact disabling of important safety procedures, and failure to timely report violations to the NRC within the required 24-hour period. So how does the agency incorporate in its enforced action, escalated enforcement action, such things as how EA 18151 and EA 18155 are related, possibly related, particularly in terms of a pattern of behavior. I guess one of the questions, if you would please just inform me of where the status of EA 18155 is, and how you could possibly, or if there's need to incorporate it in your current decision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gunther. Off the top of my head, the EA that you're referring to is the misalignment in songs. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's one clarification that needs to be made from what you read. The inspection and the activities in that enforcement action are directed at the licensees, Southern California Edison, not Holtec. So, from the standpoint of your question about how that will be considered in this enforcement action, we are focused on the two violations that were cited in the inspection at Holtec's facility. The enforcement action of which you're referencing is going to occur on a separate path, where I believe there will be a pre-enforcement conference associated with that enforcement action. I don't know offhand whether it's been scheduled or not, but I know that they're very close to probably doing the press release on the timing for that enforcement action.
Okay, I did note in the enforcement action from 18155 that both the licensee and Holtec were involved and related in the downloading anomalies that resulted in these frequent contacts between the silo wall and the cask downloading. So I appreciate your making its distinction, but so I'm to understand that only in what you're saying now, only the songs operator is involved in that particular enforcement proceeding.
Right. Just to be clear again, the focus of that enforcement action is the licensee, Southern California Edison. Holtec is a operator contractor contracted to Southern California Edison. The way that NRC views responsibility is the best way I can frame it for actions that occur at a licensed facility is the licensee is the one who is responsible for that. So if there are corrective actions that have to come, that result from that enforcement action, it'll be incumbent on Southern California Edison to do those corrective actions. If there are learnings or things that Southern California Edison in particular would like Holtec to make adjustments or improvements in how they are performing their contract with Southern California Edison, that is at the discretion and the decision of the licensee.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
We have right now 6 over the phone lines, so I'll move on. Our next is from Gary Hedrick of San Clemente Green. Sir, your line is open.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm in charge of San Clemente Green, which is representing about 5,000 concerned citizens living near San Onofre. And, you know, I just have to start by saying I'm pretty offended by the remarks Dr. Singh ended his comments with about the activists, and we're just concerned citizens, first off. You know, we listen to an admiral of the Navy. He's pro-nuclear, and he's concerned about the way nuclear waste is being handled. We are listening to physicists and engineers, and we don't claim to be experts, but we're unpaid concerned citizens combating the efforts of a for-profit corporation that's being reckless with our lives and our livelihoods. So, you know, I think you should back off on blaming us. This is not a social media problem. It's incompetence on his part.
So, Gary, I appreciate your comment. Could you focus your comments to the NRC and on this proceeding, please?
Sure. There was a whistleblower or concerned employee that contacted us about a contractual incentive built in for a financial incentive for Holtec to complete the job sooner rather than later. And I talked to Tom Palmisano at Edison about this, and he could not confirm or deny it. Will the NRC look into that, because it is not proprietary information, as Tom Palmisano responded, but I'd like to know if there is an incentive for them to rush through these things and make the kind of mistakes they're making, if the NRC will look into it and prohibit that kind of contractual agreement.
That's a very good question.
Well, that's how mistakes like these faulty shim pins are created. I think it's relevant to this topic.
No, I appreciate your pointing that out in your comment and concern. What I need to do to clarify is what the role of NRC is really, as you're well aware, because we've had many conversations in the past, that NRC is focused on the safety of the operations to the point where we, as you suggest, that we would get involved in looking at contractual arrangements between licensees and their subcontractors, or any contractual arrangement with any licensee. That isn't something that NRC would get involved in. Where we would be very interested is if there turns out to be safety issues or safety concerns that result from, I would say, poor implementation of work habits or things like that have a result in a safety finding.
Well, this is only the first incident that we're discussing about the pins. You know, they almost dropped a canister. There's a pattern of ineptness. It's all design-based. It's Holtec issues. They're gouging canisters as they're lowering. This is not a manufacturing problem. It's a design problem. And I would expect the NRC to protect the public, even if it's a little bit out of your jurisdiction. You should be concerned, as I am, about contractual incentives that may create opportunities for errors. So I don't understand why you're limiting yourself.
Again, I appreciate your view. And from the standpoint of things that are within our view and what we are concerned about in protecting the public, we are concerned about protecting the public. That is the DNA of our mission. We focus on the activities and whether there is any safety risk or potential safety risk to the public. Going in and, from our perspective, in trying to regulate contracting is not part of what this agency does. If activities result in findings and potential safety risks, we will evaluate those and we will take actions. From the standpoint, I think what you're alluding to of identification of several types of activities that are now in enforcement, those are things that do get the consideration, and I'll defer to our office enforcement coordinator, that they do not necessarily go unviewed or undiscussed or unevaluated within NRC.
This is Michelle Burgess. I just want to make a general statement. Mr. Layton's been speaking specifically of the whole tech process, but I just wanted to raise just a general thing. If there is a concern that is raised, or you have a concern, we do have processes within the NRC for you to be able to put those on the table for NRC evaluations. We have an allegations process, and you can submit that to an allegations process, and it would be reviewed. What Mr. Layton is talking about is anything that we've identified and it's resulted in a violation or apparent violation. We handle it through the enforcement process, and if it hasn't resulted in a safety issue that is an actual violation of NRC requirements, then we can take on enforcement action. That's to disposition things that have been determined to be violations. So the space that you perhaps might be talking about is our allegation space, and there is a process for that. On the NRC website, on our public website, there are mechanisms where you could submit those concerns, and they can be evaluated. Does that address what you're asking for?
I have removed him from queue since we have another handful in queue.
Okay.
Do you want me to readdress that?
No, just proceed with additional folks that have questions, please.
Our next up at bat here is Donna Gilmore of San Onofre Safety. Ma'am, your line is open.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, Chris. One of the things the NRC said in the presentation is that you look at this in line of other violations, that type of thing. I think this is a perfect time to do that. Well, number one, the 4 canisters loaded at San Onofre, Tom Palmisano admitted that the inside bottom of those were not inspected. They didn't have the tools to even do that inspection. So I raise this as an issue for the NRC, were the insides, bottoms of all the canisters loaded with the defective shims, were they inspected, the bottoms inspected? Because they weren't at San Onofre. Tom said he didn't have the tools to do it. And I know that's a requirement of the NRC that before you fill a canister, you're supposed to inspect it thoroughly inside and outside. So that's one issue I think that's related here. Another issue is the NRC admitted every single canister loaded at San Onofre is unavoidably being gouged. There's only a 1/4 inch clearance between the canister wall and a steel guide ring protruding out in the center. This is an engineering design issue that should apply to Holtec, not just to their design. You know, places where they deviated from the design need to be considered in what you're looking at now, because it's all related to an endemic problem of Holtec, of bad inferior engineering design, and a flagrant disregard for NRC regulations where they do, better to ask forgiveness than permission. And I have sympathy for the NRC's position here. I know you have a lot of good engineers that are doing the best they can, and Holtec does not make that easy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Donna. And again, as I indicated to the first caller, much of what you bring forward in reference to songs is really more pertains more to the enforcement action on the misalignment. So again, that will be going through its own enforcement process, and I believe there is going to be a pre-decisional enforcement conference for that enforcement. So I would encourage you to watch the press releases of when that's indicated that that's going to occur. Are there any questions?
We have 5 more at this time.
Sure.
Bill Weigel, your line is open now. You may ask your question.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the admissions today by Dr. Singh and Holtec on the record of their manufacturing incompetence and subsequent equipment failure, and the fact that the NRC charter contains a pledge to protect public safety. I'm curious how the NRC can allow for the public to be exposed to Holtec's real-time experiment of unproven designs that at any time could potentially cause failures that would lead to the potential loss of life or property of millions of people. And also, if the NRC is aware and comfortable with the fact that they can become liable as individuals for suits against public officials in their individual capacity for Title 42 USC, the Public Health and Welfare, subsection 1983, which imposes liability without defense on state and local officials who, acting under color of law in their individual capacity, to deprive plaintiffs of rights created by the Constitution and federal law, of which the 14th Amendment guarantees life, liberty, and property. If there was an event that would lead to the loss of any of these items, that's what's on the line. And as a Southern California resident, I would like to know how we can file for an immediate cease and desist on this criminally negligent project and pursue the element of safety jurisdiction from the California Coastal Commission permit that was issued on 10/12/15, of which they rejected a attempt to have the permit rejected because they are not in charge of the jurisdiction of the safety element, which the NRC is in charge of. And if the NRC is not in charge of on-site safety for contractor practices, who is, and who can we contact regarding these recent failures? Or are we allowing the open-air conflict of interest to have a for-profit corporation police itself while it's clearly demonstrating criminal negligence?
I appreciate your prepared comments, Bill. I'm going to turn, I believe there's one question in there on how you can intervene or provide a question to the NRC, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Burgess to let you know.
This is Michelle Burgess. There were a number of questions in there. One of them was how you could request us to take action, and we do have a process. It's within 2.206, 10 CFR 2.206, and it provides a process for you to make such requests.
I also was wanting a clarification based upon the charter for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and its pledge to protect public safety, how they can be acting in good faith upon that pledge, given the admissions on the record today by Dr. Singh and Holtec of manufacturing incompetence, and how there can be any trust given to them at this point to not have a further lurking problem that could be realized in real time, which could cause a disastrous event in Southern California, irreversibly depriving people of life, liberty, and property.
To recap some of the things that we've said before in our process, the stage that we're at in our process is information gathering. Mr. Layton specifically said that at this point in time, we don't see an immediate health and safety issue that requires an immediate order. What that means is, that's not to say that there isn't a concern, but it's just a concern that we can allow our due process to play itself out. That's what we're in the process of right now. So
just to clarify,
taking the information that we've collected so far in inspection, the additional information that's been provided today included the statements that you referenced. We're going to be taking all of that into consideration for our final action.
And just to clarify, based
Mr.
upon...
Frank, can we have the next question, please?
Yes, Raymond Lutz with Citizens Oversight. Your line is now open.
Yes, thank you very much. I have been following the San Onofre situation here. First, let me just say that I'm a little bit disturbed that public comments are not included in the official record of your meeting. And also, I'd like to complain that your notices for this meeting were very difficult to get the information for when the meeting was going to be, what number to call, and where to go.
and that the time on the webinar website does not have the time zone, so it's very hard to know what time that actually represents. Apparently it changes based on where you are. Now, today, we learned about the fact that Holtec had made this change and not notified the NRC about it in advance. And this is the largest concern here. And we also heard Mr. Singh admit that there were, quote, many other changes, unquote, made to their process, such as the bottom plate, how it mates with the shell, and I guess some of the welding there. And at this point, because they changed the design so radically with regard to these shims by changing completely the design and putting these pins in the bottom, which are obviously would bend over any kind of handling. How many other things have been changed in this design that Holtec is not telling us about? I think this warrants a full review of these various many other changes that Mr. Singh admits to. We need to find out where we stand with regard to these changes that were being made. And we notice this also, and I hate to bring this up because you said the errors in loading these into the holes is a separate thing, but I beg to differ. This is the same dry cast storage system that we're talking about. It's all one system. And you've now decided to split it up and say that the shim issue is not the same as the drop canister issue. And they, for some reason, in the drop canister issue area, have decided that there's no design issues at all. And it all has to do with handling of by SCE rather than a design issue. Well, how many design changes did Holtec make to other aspects of this system? Not just the pins, but other things such as that retainer guide ring, as they're calling it. Was that a change? And did you guys approve that in advance? Or was it something that they just did behind closed doors? So I'm going to request that you make a full review of this cast storage system and not breaking it up amongst these various discrepancies that you found so far and putting those into separate categories, but instead to unify this and put it under one broader view and take a look at the entire problem. Now, I also want to bring one other thing up, and that is Mr. Singh did not deny that this was intentional. He scoffed at it and said, oh, you know, of course, who would ever ask that question, this sort of thing. But he didn't say that it was not intentional. And I request that the NRC turn this over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation to find out if this was intentional or not, if it's beyond the scope of your abilities to do so within your own door. So, again, please broaden the scope, include these two categories, and I would definitely demand a full review of this dry cast storage system, including all of these various failures that are now happening. And everything that Mr. Singh has said, these many other changes, and make sure that you know what those are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lutz, for your comments. What I would offer is I'm going to ask Michelle Burgess again to give you the information to bring your concerns forward under the petition process, the 2.206 petition process.
Yeah, this is Michelle Burgess. One general comment, though, is regarding design changes. Our process does allow those to be made in some cases under certain parameters, and that's actually the issue that we are dealing with right now in this enforcement action. So it's not going unaddressed as a general issue. That's exactly what we're here for in this particular enforcement action. Relative to your comments about requesting a full review, an action that is, again, our 2.206 petition process. And you also mentioned that you had some specific information. Again, I just mentioned that we do have a process called our allegation process, that if you have specific information and concerns that you need us to, or you're asking us to follow up on, that process is available to you as well. It gets it into the processes that exist currently.
Thank you very much. Our next request now is from Rich Van Every. Sir, your line is open.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get to share. I'm a concerned citizen in Southern California, near San Onofre, and my question is, given that you don't see these shims or canisters are being gouged upon loading as an immediate problem, at what time do you foresee having a thorough inspection of the inside of these canisters, given there's no practical way to go about that? I personally request that you consider finding how the NRC can really stand for safety by mandating thick-walled caps that can be, or any supplement storage system that isn't a temporary solution to this long-term issue that we're going to have with. So I'm really hoping that you can put more pressure on Holtec or other manufacturers to make sure that no compromise is being made for safety by these major corporations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there another question, Fran?
Yes, we have a few. Raymond Shaddis, New England Coalition. Sir, your line is open.
Thank you. In short, we concur with Holtec's warnings regarding the errors and defects at the manufacturing design interface. The unanalyzed stresses introduced by metal forming, machining, and plating are, in our opinion, a prime bad actor in operating plant failures, not only in manufacturing, but in repair, modification, and remediation. However, that said, quality control or quality assurance has to remain primarily the unassignable responsibility of the licensee. Holtec, I thought, rather glibly passed off responsibility for defective pins or pin sockets or pin placement on the manufacturer, on their vendor. There's no way for NRC to trace defects back to their source. Somebody has to take responsibility at some way station in the whole process, and I think that needs to be the licensee. In that same vein, downstream of Holtec's administrative and materials failures was Entergy Vermont Yankee. If Entergy Vermont Yankee was using a modified canister, they should have filed an amendment to their ISFC license. Has it happened? They stopped loading canisters and inspected, decided that what was fixable was fixed and much didn't need fixing, and they simply moved on to complete loading a full array of canisters. This should not have been allowed. NRC should look into it. Many small errors at the end of the day can equal a determinant one. So these formalities, such as reporting and regulator review, must be meticulously observed. That's our comment on that. And one final one on the pins, the locator pins. The MPC, as it was termed many times in today's discussion, means multi-purpose canister. It is a canister that is intended for transportation. It's in the name. We didn't see any analysis of any potential asymmetric loading due to broken shim pins during a transportation accident. It is unfair to pass this on to the Department of Energy and to other affected persons at the time this fuel is transferred for transportation. I don't know how that works in NRC's game plan, but it really needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there someone else on the line?
Yes, Charles Langley, Public Watchdog, your line is open. Charles Langley, could you check your mute button, please? I'll move on. Chris Gorman, your line is open, ma'am.
Yes. I'm a concerned citizen living within a 50-mile radius of San Onofre. I've been following this for some time. My understanding is that the licensee is planning to resume transferring these containers into storage the middle of this month, and that's long before you finish your evaluation on this issue. And also, I'm very concerned about this retainer guide ring. I think that is an accident waiting to happen, and that is both a design and a manufacturing problem, which is being overlooked, because your comment a little while ago was that you're focusing, when it comes to that retainer guide ring, you're looking at that as a misalignment issue, which I believe you're relating that just simply to lack of proper training and operating procedures. But I really believe that is a definite both design and manufacturing problem. It's an accident waiting to happen. Right now you have a container, I guess that MPC sitting there above ground, waiting to be downloaded. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen when they go to download that, even if they do have better training, because of the design. And also, the thing that I think is critically important, a lot of what Mr. Singh was saying about these pins and them not being necessary, and that the cooling will happen in a adequate way, that's all pretty much theoretical as far as I'm concerned, because unless you actually go in there and look, you need to go inside and actually inspect. And my understanding is that once it's downloaded, they can't be inspected. That's a real concern. I think there's a huge, big issue here, and if you just narrow it down to the fact that these are just these unnecessary pins that don't matter anyway, it's not a safety issue, and if you then say, okay, well, we're just going to say this is okay and move on and continue with the downloading, you're really overlooking all the much bigger major problems. And I would like you to address these and specifically answer me back about this retainer guide ring and the fact that the design and manufacturing is substandard, and about inspecting inside.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gorman. What I would offer is that the issues that you're bringing forward really have more of a relevance to the enforcement action that is going to be proceeding very shortly for the misalignment event at San Onofre. I think we have time for one more question.
Marvin Lewis of the Public, your line is open, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that you're keeping it open for one more question from the public. This is supposed to go on till 5 o'clock. It's only 4:16 on my clock. I sure would like to hear other questions from the public. My question is a simple one. First of all, this Dr. Singh spoke for quite a while, over an hour on my watch, about various subjects, and one of the subjects he brought up was very, very interesting to me, because I've been bringing it up a lot too, namely the manufacturing stresses that occur are not watched and not reported on. I don't know if you have any idea what manufacturing stresses are, but let me give you an example. Many people leave their car out at night, come back in the morning, and the window's broken. And sure enough, nobody threw a rock, nobody touched that window. The manufacturing stresses were enough to break a window on a car. And I say that the manufacturing stresses can do a heck of a lot. And since Dr. Singh brought it up and pointed out how deficient the requirements are on the guidances, namely the books that the NRC puts out to help manufacturers and licensees meet the safety requirements. They're called guidances or guides. And Dr. Singh pointed out himself that there was not even one mention of manufacturing or manufacturing defects in the whole schmear. I think that's a pretty important thing to look at, and I hope you will, before we have an accident, and it shows that something we didn't even worry about, namely hanging maintenance tags, can destroy an entire nuclear power plant. Well, residual stresses can destroy a lot more than a simple canister, and we're not looking at that. And I'm really feel it's deficient, and so as Dr. Singh pointed out, it's deficient that you're not looking at the manufacturing problems, the manufacturing stresses, and I hope you will do so. I'm not saying that's the only error, but since that's an error that was pointed out by Dr. Singh himself, I hope that you get after it and do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have exceeded our 30-minute time frame for public comments, so I would offer that we are adjourning today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Conference is concluded. Please go ahead and disconnect. Thank you very much.